Hi guys, back with another episode of the Grapplers Academy. And before we get into today's episode, I think we'd better cover a pretty important topic of conversation because this could become a problem throughout the match. It's the pronunciation of the guys' names that we're going to be doing the match of today. I'm going to go with the straight up Brazilian way of saying it. I'm going to go Xande Ribiero
Xande.
and Roger Gracie. Okay, so
And I'm just going to go with good old Xande and Roger. I'm not. I'm going to refer to Xande as Ribiero and Roger Gracie as Hodger. Hodger.
Roger. Yeah, same thing. It doesn't take anything away from it. But as long as we know what we're going on about, it's Xande and Hodger.
Yeah,
for the most part. I mean, to be honest, I remember seeing these guys' names when I was first getting into Jits, and I was like, how the hell are you saying this name? I was listening to the commentators say Xande, and I was like, that's not the name of the guy in the match. Like, it's Alexander. What's going on here?
Yes, that's all. I was like, just call him Alex. It's miles easier.
Yeah. The match that we're looking at today is from the 2005 ADCC. Under 99 kilo match. It's actually a semi-final match between Xande and Roger. Again, another awesome match. That's why we're going into it. Loads of interesting takeaways from it today. But if we just go over a bit of a breakdown on the records and histories leading up to this match, it's quite interesting. They've gone back and forth against each other over the years, haven't they, with varying levels of success.
Yeah, they've kind of got that sort of tit for tat, I win, you win. Both got a couple of wins from each other, and they've actually both got a very, very substantial record. Like looking at here, like Hodger, he's got 76 wins versus 7 losses, and Ribiero, he's got 160 wins to 42 losses.
Yeah, it's something like 160 wins. So both pretty strong. And looking at a bit of a breakdown here online about preferences on finishes, it's quite interesting as well, isn't it? With the knowledge of how this match ends up panning out, because Hodges got a favourite finish, hasn't he? He's got like a high percentage finish.
Yeah. So from what we're sort of seeing here is he's got probably about a third of his wins by submission have come from choke from the back. And obviously knowing the result of this match, Ribiero loses by choke from the back, but it's also the highest percentage loss that he's got from his submission losses. Like, he's only had 6 submission losses, with 2/3 of those being from rear naked choke, which again, it's not a bad thing to lose by, but it sort of ties in quite nicely with it being Hodges' sort of preferred finish, looking like, and Ribeiro's sort of highest percentage loss by submission.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And when we were looking at breaking this match down earlier on in the week, going over some of the details together, we were talking about the dynamics of these guys have faced each other quite a lot in the past. They're familiar with how each other feels on the mat. They're familiar with each other's game plan. So we're talking about how that's actually quite an interesting dynamic when it comes to these big tournaments. And you can be a little bit more open, playing against your opponent who you've already gone against. There's probably a little bit less of a feeling of reservedness there. You kind of got a feeling about what they're going to be going for. And equally the same for them against you. They know what sort of moves you're going to be looking for. It's like, when you roll against you guys in the gym, your training partners, it's always a much more exciting role when you know the roles of the guy that you're playing with.
Yeah, you can sort of relax a little bit, sort of play a little bit looser. And just sort of looking at his record here, like leading up to this, Hodger had sort of defeated Ribiero twice leading up, 3 times, apologies. Yeah, 3 times leading up to this. And sort of going forward, like Ribiero wins a year later, and they still have quite a few different exchanges. But it's sort of, like I said, it makes for a more exciting match when both players know each other and they can kind of relax a little bit, enjoy the match, and sort of let loose, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, looking at Hodges' record as well, the majority of his losses are to Xande and to Jacare.
Mm.
So, in fairly recent succession as well, leading up to this 2005. But yeah, all makes for interesting looking when you look at the dynamics of the match leading up to it. Both highly decorated players. Xande's ADCC weight class 99 kilo champion in 2007,
Yeah,
2007 or 2009.
Both of those years, he got first place.
Absolutes, both all round good players. Equally, Guy no Guy as well.
Yeah,
we've got a good game for both.
I think another point worth mentioning as well is, like, Xande had only had his guard passed about 4 times in his career up to date, with one of those being from Hodger during this match. Like, some referees might not count this as a guard pass because his shoulders and hips weren't flat to the floor. But like we spoke about this, I'd certainly count this as a guard pass, as he got past his guard and ended up on his back, which in my books counts as quite a successful guard pass, really.
Yeah, definitely. Xande's guard retention is good, and I was actually watching a documentary a few years back on the Ribiero brothers, and Salo was talking about how difficult Xande's guard is to pass, and what a quality training partner he is to have on the mats. Yeah. A bit of a legendary position of control on that. And when you think about that in terms of what that means on the mats, if you've got a difficult guard to pass, and you've got good defense on the legs as well, you're going to make it a lot narrower window of opportunity for your opponent to have opportunities to submit you, which is essentially the aim of the game. If you can't get past the guard, you can't score points. If you can't submit them, then you're basically going to be opening yourself up for a defensive game.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think touching on what you've mentioned there, sort of, we made a comment about this where they don't seem to attack the legs as much as the modern day players do. Like we sort of mentioned that we sort of saw the openings and saw the possibilities for it, but back around 2005, the culture was very anti-leg lockers, wasn't it? It's sort of seen as quite a taboo attack on your opponent, even going to things like toe holds and knee bars and straight footlocks. It wasn't the thing to do. So when you do look over the older matches, there's less sort of leg attacks that we've, especially that I've been noticing as well.
I think definitely from what we've seen watching these older matches is the knowledge of the legs is there, but it just doesn't seem to be utilised.
Yeah.
Dean Lister, I've heard him mention one time in the past that he went to compete in Brazil, finished a guy with a leg lock, and the crowd was booing him. Everyone was saying it was basically an illegal move. And then 6 months later, he's looking online and hearing about this new position that comes up, and it's a new Brazilian position that they're starting to play, and it's actually the position that he finished the guy with. And rather than just saying like, yeah, fair play, that was a good move, we'll incorporate that into our system, they're like frowning on it at one point, and then it becomes introduced. And just maybe that mindset of a bit of negativity around the leg lock game didn't do these guys the favours of opening up the opportunities that were there to get the finishes. But doesn't go against the fact that they've got the knowledge. It's just for some reason it doesn't seem like they want to play that game.
No. Like I said, it was sort of kind of seen as like the dirty tricks and an unfavourable way to end a match. But at the end of the day, a win's a win. If it stays in the rule set, a win's a win at the end of the day. And it's up to both players to know how to play them, whether that's defensively or offensively.
Yeah, and that being said, I think we should dive straight into the beginning of the match.
Oh, definitely. Okay, yeah. So the first sort of sequence we're going to look at here is sort of Hodger going in for a sort of guillotine attack from sort of a straight headlock, from a front headlock attack. And he has like a lovely elbow control, which causes Ribiero to sort of turn his head in, making his head more available for the attack. But like an interesting point that you sort of made before was about Hodges, sort of the size difference between the two of them.
Yeah, so obviously it's a 99 kilo match, but kind of be joking around that Roger Gracie is like the prototype of what you would make in a lab for an MMA fighter. He's got
Yeah.
all the knowledge and the skill set, but he's an enormous human being. He's like 6'4", all limbs. He's just like the sort of guy. You know, we looked at a match against Josh Barnett, who's a massive guy as well, but 130 kilos. Like Hodges is a massive guy, but he's all limbs. He's all limbs, so it's easy access for him, as you'll see when we go into this first bit of the match, that it doesn't take a lot of effort for him to get his shoulder and his arm over the top and get into that front headlock position.
No, definitely.
Easily accessible for him. And that kind of plays in throughout the course of the match as well. So yeah, if we dive into this first bit, we'll kind of see how that pans out.
So yeah, as you'll see here, they sort of start to engage in a little bit of clinch work, but try keep an eye out for what Hodges doing with Ribiero's elbow and how he sort of baits him in for basically snatching him down for the headlock and for the guillotine. But I think from like analysing this match, we can sort of see the grip that Hodges starts to go for on that far sort of Russian collar tie. If we just pause here for a sec. That initial grip he goes for on that collar tie, he starts to try and find that for the whole of the match. And I find it makes quite a good use of it, I think. Controlling that far elbow, which takes over Ribiero's posture, his shoulder control, and also the direction that he starts trying to sort of turn into.
Yeah, there's kind of two different grappling strategies going on here on the stand-up, isn't there? Throughout the match, it seems obvious that that's the strategy that Hodges is looking to employ, and Xande is looking for a lot of collar ties. Probably because he's trying to bring Hodges down to his level and break his posture down a little bit. There's such a height difference that, you know, Xande is not a small guy. I think he's 6 foot tall. But if you're ever going against somebody who's, you know, almost a good half a foot taller than you, it's difficult to engage with them. So collar tie is always a good strategy of bringing them down to your level because it breaks their posture as well. But yeah, like you just said, super effective 2-on-1 control on the arm from Hodges throughout the whole match here.
Yeah, definitely. I think as well, like when I'm sort of grappling against taller players, I'm not a personal fan of sort of reaching up for the collar ties. I find it gives too much of a window, sort of under my armpit, and also it leaves me a little bit vulnerable. So I think strategy-wise, I'd have more preferred to see Ribiero sort of trying to control the waist, maybe try and get an arm drag, or maybe try control the sort of arms a bit more of Hodges. As opposed
it's interesting,
to,
isn't it? They could have potentially, a better strategy would have been to roll reversals on what they were looking to attack.
Yeah, definitely. So I think like Hodges definitely got the advantage here with the collar ties, and he could have utilised it much better. But yeah, like you said, the kind of like a role reversal and what they should have done strategy wise. But we'll just go back over the sort of guillotine entry, the initial one. So you can sort of see there, Hodges already got this. But what he's doing here, he's controlling the outside of Ribiero's sort of arm, as well as controlling the wrist. And it's sort of controlling where he can sort of go into and out and sort of move his posture around with. So as Ribiero's trying to sort of turn away, if he does turn away from it, it gives Hodges a nice little arm drag or sort of a fairly easy pathway to the back or for the legs. So he's having to sort of try and square up with him, which sort of goes against his favour, really, because it gives him that Hodges the entry to the guillotine. Is there anything that you want to add to that, Bon?
Yeah, as you said, because he's got the control on the outside arm there, he's giving him one path of direction to go, and it's immediately underneath his armpit, so he can cinch up and get that arm over the top. So, as you rightly said there, he's got all those options for getting in on the back if he's successful with the arm drag or the 2-on-1 control, but it leaves Xande one option, and it's the option that ends up panning out on this, and it's the guillotine pull that he does, which is really nice.
Yeah. So they will play this through sort of in a bit of slow motion, so we can sort of see, because the footwork of these two is very impressive. Like, it's never forwards and backwards. There's always a lot of circling. they're rutting, trying to get the dominant head control. And you can sort of see here now where Hodge is starting to pass over and attack for that guillotine. So again, he's got the armpit, he's got the wrist control. And I bet Ribiero here is driving into Hodge a little bit, trying to get him to back up a touch.
So yeah, probably what we can see here is like this is in that circular motion. Before, Xande was quite tall and had a little bit better posture control in him. But as you start to see the circling action as we come through, we can also see Xande's back start to dip down.
Yeah,
Hodge will have realised that and then starts to capitalise on that immediately. So you know he's up right here. They're almost like in a triangle shape together. But as we start to circle back around in the other direction, if we play again forward, you'll notice Xande's back starts to drop, and then Hodge's level gets over the top of him. So as soon as he's in this position here where he's capitalised and broke Xande's posture down, he's got the height advantage. And now from this position, as we continue forward, he's immediately going to capitalise on that and occupy the space that he's been able to create by pushing him down, switch his position and come round the neck with a beautiful front headlock.
Oh, definitely. I think one thing to point out here as well is what Hodge's left arm's doing. Also, what we can see here with this arm. So he's got his this grip here has got underneath the armpit, and he's not just kind of like posturing up and hoping that Ribiero sort of drops his head into under his armpit. If you sort of we sort of see his arm, he's throwing his body across. So he's throwing Ribiero across his body as well as moving into it to capture the head. And it's a really, really lovely entry, like you said, to this guillotine, or sort of just a bit of a headlock scenario. And he jumps straight into the guard. And if we sort of go back a touch there, I didn't notice this on my initial studies of this, but the way he jumps guard here is quite interesting. So he jumps it so that Ribiero is going to fall onto the preferred guillotine side, but he kind of jumps a bit of a half guard with a half elevator, and his other leg wraps around the back. So it's sort of like a half butterfly, so he can't pass away from the choking arm.
Yeah, he's looking immediately for that posture control, isn't he?
Yeah. And he's sort of hanging on him here. And I think I could argue that Ribiero's sort of tactic here might just to be tire out Hodge's arms and let him hang a little bit, because he might not feel too threatened. Especially with the arm in guillotine, it's quite a difficult one to attack from this angle.
Yeah, you can see as well when we go into this old guillotine series that Hodge is putting quite a lot of effort into this choke. You can see it on his face. He's grimacing and really trying to put a lot of force into it. So yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe trying to just hold out on that. He doesn't feel like it's necessarily a tight enough threat, and just letting him burn himself out. Because when you're on the receiving end of something like that, you can feel how much force somebody's putting in.
Oh yeah, you can also sort of feel it fade a little bit as well. So I think you might be just looking here to be like, it's late in the day. He's going to be a little bit fatigued. Let's just see how fatigued he actually is now. And as we sort of progress through it, you can sort of see where he bops out and he goes straight for that guillotine again.
No, Xande's making like a really interesting option here when he's playing in this position. He's kind of always looking to keep his head low. And I thought it was an unusual strategy when he's trying to pass there, because time and time again he's getting his head wrapped up, and again there straight away. It's because his head position is low, close to the hip. He's not got a central line on it, and it just leaves it open for Hodge to get over the top on that every single time. Now, it's a tight position, but when he's actually got it wrapped up, he's not super deep. When you're looking to finish a guillotine, you almost want your armpit right on the base of your opponent's neck. And what you'll see when we're in a couple of the positions, here is a perfect example. There's a lot of space between the base of Xande's skull and the top of his t-shirt. That's kind of the space that you want to occupy there to get a lot of tightness on a finish, isn't it? You want to take away that space.
Oh, definitely, yeah. And also if you look at the sort of angle of his arm as well, he's not exactly in a position where he can start to apply direct pressure to the throat. He's kind of almost hanging on his chin there and kind of waiting for Ribiero to drop his base down. Whereas I think if Hodge would have come up to meet him on the back of the neck and possibly even inserted his second arm in over the top, so he's not got the overhook. He's sort of going by the neck. He might have had a chance of finishing this because it looks deep on the chin, and it looks like Ribeiro's not exactly too threatened by it. So this sort of playing conservatively and attacking the chin like this could have played to his advantage in getting the finish with a guillotine.
Definitely.
But this sort of sequence and back and forth goes on a little bit between the two of them for a little while. Again, I think initially Hodges' hip positioning doesn't necessarily help, because I think he's trying to stay 2 under Ribiero.
So an important thing to think about as well when you consider the body mechanics of these two guys is Hodges is so much taller. You can get a finish on a guillotine from a half guard. And usually it's going to be easier for a taller guy to do it because of the leverage. You can lock that leg down, start to stretch it out, and then also pull up in the opposite direction with the head. It's actually quite an effective finish, and you can get it with the arm in. So surprising here that Hodges didn't maybe go for that lockdown and try and stretch Xande out.
Yeah, no, it's possibly. But again, like if we sort of go back a little bit and we have a look at the level of exertion that he's putting into it by just analysing his sort of facial expressions, he's working quite hard there. So maybe he might not have had the energy, because it looks like he's trying to tie up Ribeiro's legs there with some sort of lockdown. So he might not have had the energy to think that thought process through.
Yeah, that's a trying face there, isn't it? That's the face of determination.
Yeah, no, definitely. Either that or he's holding a trumpet anyway.
Could be.
You never know.
Anything that works.
That's it.
You might have had some of that acai bowl in between the quarterfinals and the semi-finals, and be wanting to release a bit of it as a distraction tactic.
I think if you would have had the acai bowl, I think he would have possibly popped Ribeiro's head with the pressure of his guillotine. So I think for Ribeiro's safety, it's important that he didn't have the acai beforehand.
I was actually considering whether Xande's wanted to hang out in that position a little bit longer to try and stretch him out. It looks like his neck's getting elongated here, so maybe he's trying to make up that height deficit, maybe trying to bring himself up to 6'2" tall.
That's very true. It'll certainly help with the clinch work anyway.
Yeah.
But you're sort of seeing here now, Ribiero sort of passed through to half guard, and he's got Hodges sort of flattened out here. So again, there's not really the angle here to finish the choke. And as we sort of progress through, you sort of see this is sort of Ribeiro's good place to be now with his top half guard. He's seen him in a number of matches. His pressure and ability to flatten his opponents out is really, really good.
This is kind of like the next interesting point of the match or phase of the match, isn't it? The quality of top control position and pressure that Xande is able to get from here. So he's kind of effectively escaped 4 or 5 different guillotine attempts there and made slight adjustments every time to get better downward pressure and get out of that closed guard. Because you can see that Hodges' position now, he's pretty much flat on the back.
Yeah,
Xande's escaped the hips. He's not inside any sort of control, where at the beginning on the takedown, the leg was up on the back. He had his posture broken down. He's almost completely sprawled out at the side here. He's got one leg in a half guard, but he's got a good strong cross space and also a decent amount of pressure down with his other side as well. So hips and shoulders controlling here, and Hodges almost completely flat on his back and has lost any sort of grip that he had going on over the top of the neck.
No, definitely. And sort of we can sort of see as it progresses, the pressure that Ribiero was able to sort of drive through. And also even look at the exhaustion on Hodges. He's not fighting a great deal at the moment. He's probably using this time to rest a little bit. But then he's, like I say, this pressure that Ribeiro's got on him is doing a really good job of sort of securing the position. And this position here now was sort of, for me, quite an interesting point for it, especially for the match, because just the amount of the ability for Ribiero to pin down from this position and control Hodges' hips for a fair amount of time is quite impressive up until obviously Roger escapes, but he's constantly attacking for that Kimura and sort of baiting it. He's keeping heavy pressure through, and he's just making Roger's life a little bit more difficult in this position.
Yeah, he's got good control of the hips there, hasn't he? You can see he's turned away, showing his back to Roger, but he's got a complete lockdown. He's got his hips isolated with his own hips and his elbows pinching in tight as well. And you can see as we progress through this bit of footage now that Roger's looking to try and move his hips. He's trying to posture and frame and get away, but the squeeze that's there, he's basically locking down his whole body. And as anybody who's rolling knows, like, you can control the hips, you can control a large percentage of the movement and take away a lot of potential movement from your opponent. So just if you pause it again a second there, just interestingly to go back to what Simon was saying before is, they've had that little bit of an exchange, an important mindset thing. When you know that your opponent's resting, that's a good time to capitalize. I always think if I've come out of a tough exchange like that and I can feel that my opponent's resting, that's the time that I'm going to try and put it on them, make it more comfortable for them. And when the guard's down, that's always a good opportunity to try and capitalize and get a submission. Interesting from here, I don't know whether Xande's tired as well, but he's not really kind of looking for anything. It looks like there's a Kimura there a couple of times, but he just seems quite content to hold Roger in that position and shut him down from any attacks on his end. The only thing that I will say is that he's doing a good job of tying up the legs from the bottom and stopping him from getting that knee free to pass.
Oh yeah, definitely.
To overcome that later on, but there's not really a lot of intent here from an attacking position.
No, I've got to agree with that. Like I said, the Kimura attempts, they're more sort of baits, and he doesn't capitalise on it when it does come through. But yeah, I think looking here, Ribiero's probably just as tired. Like, he spent the first couple of minutes of the match defending guillotines and trying to get past the guard, and don't forget as well, he's been defeated by this guy a couple of times before this match. So he's probably thinking, I've got him on his back, I'm progressing up. He's having that bit of moment where he's like, this is really happening here. And he might have to sort of recalibrate his brain a little bit during this time, because it's the final, isn't it, as well, this? So
this is the semi-final.
Oh, the semis. Yeah, sorry.
And, what's also important to remember again is it's another ADCC match. So at this phase in the match, there's no points yet.
No.
So this position really doesn't mean anything. Everything that's happened up till this point in terms of advantages, disadvantages, there's none, psychological and positional, because no points have come into it yet. Points obviously don't come into the match until halfway into the match in the ADCC. For this one, it'll be 10 minutes for the semi-finals, so no points up until 5 minutes into the match.
Well,
but yeah, there's a lot of opportunity there for Kimuras. Roger's doing a good job of keeping Xande's left leg isolated so he can't clear the knees and start to get around to a side control. But as we start playing through this, we'll see that Roger kind of changes his tactic because he can't get his hips free. What he does is a good job of reaching around and starting to manipulate on the spine, because he grabs his head and pulls him flat and then starts to be able to free up his hips a little bit to then create an escape or create some sort of space for an escape. So if we play through this now, I think it's coming up shortly. He switches his attack from moving the hips and goes back in.
Just before we move on a little bit, I just want to sort of point out a few details here that for anybody who plays this kind of half guard game, that they could use to just sort of improve the position. So one of the things here is like letting Roger frame here. Like, you've got your arm versus your hips. So I think one of the things that Ribiero could and arguably should be doing is trying to get his hips and his rib cage higher up Roger's torso to bring his arms out of action and put them in a weaker position. And secondly, it's a detail that my coach Cam showed me with this. And where his knee is here, as opposed to being underneath his thigh, have it inside the sort of crook of the hip, as it kind of helps secure it and pin it, and gives you a bit more leverage when you're trying to free this trapped leg from inside the half guard.
Yeah, so what you're saying for anybody looking there is his knee that's pinned in between Roger's leg and the mat should be, rather than under the leg, out by the side, controlling at the hip.
Yeah, definitely. And trying to get underneath the armpits with your hips and your rib cage, just to further isolate the arms. And it keeps these frames out of use, which in this position can be an absolute nightmare. And as Bonn rightfully said before, like Hodger does the right thing here to get his to get to a better position and also get back to his feet. So, before anything you want to add to that before we start playing?
Now let's go through it.
Perfect. You can sort of see here, like Hodger's doing a really good job here of framing against his hips, but there's no urgency from Ribiero to try and climb up the body. He seems like he's just quite happy to have the hips isolated. And that was a nice little detail there that we saw Hodger going for.
Yeah, for me, this is really interesting. And this might be one of the reasons that Xande wasn't able to climb further up his body. Hodger's a long torso. He might have found it difficult to actually get his position further up, and especially with that lockdown, Hodger's doing a great job of keeping him further down the body. So those frames that he's already managed to get in place, and now the leg, the lockdown that he's got on the legs, is going to stop Xande from being able to climb up him. So great little detail there.
So I think it's also worth noting the way that Hodger gets into this lockdown. He's not trying to swing himself around and trying to find it out the blue. He can feel it there. His sensitivity's there to find it. So rather than trying to panic and sort of make it obvious that's what he's looking for, he starts to walk his foot and start to sneak it in there. So you'll sort of see with his bottom leg in a minute, he starts to walk his foot backwards to find the ankle, and then he locks it in before he goes for it. So like I said, it's a very calculated move, and it's not just sort of thrown out of there. But again, we've got to credit sort of Ribiero's base here as well, because this is a very difficult position to stay on top with.
So now he's doing a good job of managing to get Xande a bit more on top of him and able to free his hips up a little bit more, and nice explosive bridge out.
Yeah. And this part here, again, Ribiero's doing a very good job of staying on top. And I think if you would have had a bit more control of the shoulders and sort of got past the hips a bit more, he probably would have had a better chance with that head and arm choke. But if you watch Hodger's half guard game, it's all about getting that leg sort of isolated and elevated to sort of create a bit of unbalance within his opponent to then create the space. You can sort of see what Ribiero's trying to do. He's trying to flatten Hodger back out now, trying to shut down his frames. But this lockdown game that he's playing is really nice.
I don't know about you. I really like playing a lockdown from underneath. I feel like it opens up a lot of opportunities from underneath in a half guard.
No, definitely. I think there's a few pet peeves that I've got with it where some players will use it just to slow down the pace of a match as opposed to trying to escape. So I think using it in this way where you're trying to control the limb, get them rocking side to side and elevating is a much more productive way to use this position. And also trying to use it to escape, whereas I've seen some players use it purely just to slow down the pace of the match.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think a lot of guys use it wrongly to kind of just freeze the position up a little bit and stop the guy on top from advancing. But there's actually a lot of use from the underneath. It's an extra grip that you can get with the legs that isn't really there as an option with the upper body to start manipulating the position. And as we've seen here, when we progress through this, again, just to go through that escape, there's a nice back and forth of the hips, and it actually ends up freeing up space for him to get up and get out of this position that he's been under for a couple of minutes now.
Yeah, like sort of what looks like to sort of the more casual eye, it looks like he's just been bench pressed off. But prior to this, you can sort of see the work that Hodger's putting in to disrupt Ribiero's base, get him unsettled, to then create the space to get back up to his feet. So he's got the frame under the throat. He's got the lockdown, and he's starting to create space. Now, anyone who's rolled knows how uncomfortable and difficult it is to fight this frame. So I think he's done a really good job to get underneath the chin there and creating that frame. But it doesn't come without its flaws. Like, he does put himself at risk of a head and arm choke. But like you mentioned before, Bon, having the lockdown and being such a long player, that kind of minimises that risk for Roger at this moment in time.
Yeah, I think at this point in this phase of the match, it's quite a calculated risk. He knows he's got a good lockdown and actually being able to stretch him out. So I think in terms of calculating the risk from underneath there, that framing and actually the position that he's ended up getting in probably doesn't feel like he's in too much of a risk of getting that head and arm triangle there. But don't, if you start playing around with this position, discount that as being an option. As Simon's saying, it's like it is always there as a potential if the guy can pop that hand to the side, pop the elbow to the side, and then wrap that triangle up around the head and arm. It's don't think that isn't an option that can happen just because it doesn't happen in this position.
Especially if they're not too fussed about getting sort of a few elbow bruises across the cheeks and jawline. So there you can sort of see
that acai bench press gets him off.
That's it. That was pure strength jitsu, and there was no technique there, obviously, to the casual eye. But like I said, he's creating the space with the hips. He's creating the frame underneath Ribiero's throat, and this stops this pressure going through. And he rolls the hips up, gets his knees in, and he gets back to his feet in quite a nice manner, really. I quite enjoyed sort of seeing how that escape worked, especially from being in such a bad position in bottom half guard.
Yeah, and I mean, overall, I'd probably argue that it didn't appear that there was a lot of effort exerted from Roger to be able to do that.
No. I think probably leading up to this escape, Ribiero's mistake was probably allowing Roger to rest and arguably recover a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Like we were talking about before, when somebody's exerted a lot of energy, perhaps going for a submission or trying to control a position, like it did when Xande ended up coming on top, that's the time to capitalise, make advantage of it in that position where they're tired, enforce your will on them. Don't let them recover. If you're tired, they're probably going to be tired as well. So capitalise on it. Don't wait for them to get their energy back. Every second that you're resting, you're giving your opponent a second to rest.
No, definitely. Especially if they're on the bottom. And
especially if they're on the bottom.
If you're on your back and your opponent is on top and they're sort of slowing down, same thing, that's your time to go. That's your time to get them moving and get them doubting and build up that bit of that anxiety in them. Because again, competition's quite a high stress situation for a lot of people. And if they're slowing down when they're on top and they're trying to find a moment to rest, that's your time while you're defending to take it up a notch and get them to doubt themselves and doubt their own position, which over time would definitely pay into your favour. And like I said, it paid into Hodges' favour here, really, didn't it?
Yeah, definitely capitalised on that. He didn't settle. He didn't just let Xande sit there on top and kind of control the position. He was constantly looking for an escape. So he didn't want to stay in that bad position. So just a good little mindset to get in, whether you're in the gym and it's going to carry through into competition, is don't let your opponent settle. They're just going to be able to get something tighter, be able to cinch it up a little bit more, correct the position. As soon as you're in a bad position, get moving, disturb the base. But of course, always doing it with a calculated mind. Don't just start spazzing out and giving them limbs, because 9 times out of 10, you can probably guarantee that they've seen that reaction a million times before and kind of want you to do that. So think about what you're doing, but don't settle.
Oh, 100%. And on a sort of secondary note to that, if you're settling because you're tired and you don't want to be there, it's probably time to sort of get some work on your cardio as well. It's cardio is one of your best friends in grappling, as well as strength, obviously. But having the improved cardiovascular system will improve your decision making, as well as help you fight through scrambles and not be defending while you're exhausted.
Absolutely. And always remember, just get a good bowl of acai in before you start training.
Well, that's it. Like I said, I'm pretty sure Roger was banned from the ASAE as well as Ribiero because during this time he could have potentially took Ribeiro's head off with that guillotine. Like, it's quite a dangerous position.
Yeah, if you go into competition, always be careful to not test too high for levels of acai in the blood. I think the IBJF are starting to test for that in 2021.
Is it 5 berries per milligram?
5 berries per 10 kilos of body weight, isn't it? So
that's the one,
There's that dilution there. So, yeah.
I think I can get 45 berries then.
So on a more serious note, now that we've popped out of that escape there, the next exchange that we're going to go into is back into that stand-up fight. So as we were talking about earlier, same exchange goes on, collar ties and 2-on-1 control. So let's cue that up and have a look at that really interesting exchange.
Oh, definitely. Okay, so this next part we're looking at is a bit of a takedown exchange between the two of them. Quite a nice scramble, and Roger sort of goes in with this outside elbow control again, like the Russian collar tie, but with sort of like a Kimura aspect to it as well. It's quite an interesting grip, and it's quite a good one for controlling Ribeiro's posture.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that go on in this next exchange that were evident earlier on in the match as well. So you can kind of see that they've got like a bit of a game plan for how the wrestling is going to go. ADCC is quite a heavy wrestling focused tournament. So you can imagine that before in the build up to this tournament, they've been practicing their wrestling heavily. So just interesting to see how both of the different strategies work out. They're probably looking at each other's potential of matching up in the bracket as well. And obviously with that experience of having gone against each other before, maybe in the training camps leading up to it, they've thought this strategy that they're implementing in with Hodges' 2-on-1 controls and Xande's collar ties was probably the best one to go from. So just really interesting to see how it pans out.
Oh, definitely. So we'll get the match up, and we'll go back to sort of playing through again. Like I say, you can sort of see here where this outside arm control here, it's quite an interesting way to control someone's posture, I think. Like, he's got his shoulder on top of Ribeiro's shoulder, he's wrapping round the outside, and he's grabbing his own wrist, while his other hand's got hold of Ribeiro's wrist at the bottom there as well. I think just sort of being on the receiving end of something similar to this, it's quite an exhausting way to have someone hanging off you here. Especially like if you look at the shape of Ribeiro's back compared to the shape of Hodges' back, it looks like he's gone pretty heavy there, and it won't surprise me if Ribiero was pretty exhausted at this point.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a beautiful hunch in his spine there, hasn't he? Whereas Hodges is just completely direct force going from the hips through his legs, through his hips, and right down into the shoulders. Whereas you can see that nice little hump that Xande's got in his back. It's not a position where you can really generate any power whatsoever. And yeah, as you were saying before, this 2-on-1 control is quite a difficult one to try and shake off. And kind of just going back to what we were talking about before, it'd be interesting to see where Hodges was training his wrestling for this ADCC tournament, because that's quite a common wrestling or catch wrestling style position, isn't it?
I think he did have some wrestlers sort of in-house. I think they're still there as well. But from what I've heard, Hodges' wrestling is very, very good. And you know what? It would be interesting to see if he did ever come back to compete in any future ADCCs, to see how he'd sort of fare. Because like pound for pound, he is one of the greatest grapplers. Like, he made light work in 2017 of Buchecha, who made it to the 2009 final. Sorry, not 2009, 2019 final.
Yep.
So yeah, it would be. I would be quite interested to see if Hodges did ever make a return to the competition scene.
Hodges is one of those revered players, isn't he? You know, when you always listen to interviews of guys that are at the top of the game now, who they were looking up to or who they think are the greats that they'd like to have had a matchup with, Hodges' name's always at the top of the list.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And like, you can sort of see the way he's using this here with his wrestling. But again, Ribeiro's not stopping. And he gets in on a nice little single leg there. But we've got to appreciate the way Hodges countered it with that Uchimata.
Yeah, so again, he's kind of using that same 2-on-1 control to get in over the head. You can see there he dives over the top when he feels that Xande's head's gone down. But this time, rather than just staying there and going with it and coming down, Xande drives up, comes down on a single and starts to try and turn Hodges' position and try and run through that to get some breathing room. But again, the leverage advantage that Hodges got here, he's up on one leg, he's bouncing around. Probably most people would be down by this point, but he manages to get that inside leg in, get it down on the mat and switch it out to a really nice Uchimata sweep.
Yeah, and I think I love the sort of thing here now as Ribeiro starting to drop down. You can sort of almost see Hodges just falling forward and waiting for that balance to go. And it's just
nice, isn't it?
really, really lovely to watch.
Like a classic judo sweep.
Yeah. And
I mean, that would have been Ippon in a judo match there, straight onto his back, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. But you've also got to, like, try to appreciate the amount of weight, because as he throws him up, he's got his own weight and Hodges' weight landing on his chest.
And Hodges wastes absolutely no time here whatsoever. As soon as they hit the deck, he knows what he wants. He runs through this scramble and comes up immediately on the back and starts to attack. So the opposite from what we were talking about before, there's no hesitation there. He's just pile drives Xande into the mat with 200 kilos worth of weight effectively, knows it's a good takedown, and then immediately scrambles for the back. Goes out of bounds, uses that ADCC advantage of going out of bounds and then securing your position so that the referee resets you in that position back in the centre of the mat.
No, definitely.
It's a tactic I'm starting to see more and more of the more of these ADCC matches that we go over.
I think it's across most of grappling, to be honest. But I've also got to sort of like look into the psychology a little bit behind. You can sort of see he continues the sort of scramble here, even after the referee sort of saying to stop. So he's jumping on, he's going for the half Nelson, and he's jumping on there. And the referee's already told him to stop, and he's still attacking. And sort of the way that he disengages, the way he sort of kicks away Ribeiro and runs straight to the centre.
Yeah.
Like, mentally for Ribeiro, that's got to be a little bit soul-breaking. Come out of a scramble, he's able to run to the centre, and you're getting up slowly and walking to the centre. Like, look how tired he looks there, whereas Hodges there going, come on, I'm ready, let's go. He's not wasting any time.
How am I going to get out of this position now? You know, a slow walk over, thinking, crap, he's got my back.
Yeah.
It's kind of data crunching before he gets back in position.
But like, we're sort of looking here, you can sort of see Ribeiro's not stopping the defence here now. You can sort of, he's playing more reactive than anything, but he's looking to try and get away from here. Like, he's not defeated quite yet mentally. So he's still got the fight in him. And he does manage to escape from this back. And he managed to get...
Still got... Yep, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was about to say he's managed to get to like a good bottom guard game to sort of keep away from that rear naked choke.
Yeah, so I'm just going to say that he's still got good energy at this point in the match. It's before the match has gone into overtime, and he's got the energy and mental clarity there to start mounting an escape and get out from that. We'll see when we go right to the end of the match how the difference and contrast in what's just happened there, which is essentially the same position that the match ends up finishing in. The contrast in position and maybe fatigue that come into play towards the end of the match, which is the difference between him not getting finished there and then the finish happening at the end.
Yeah, definitely. And like I say, there's a lot less fight in him. Like mentally as well, I think. Like I said, fatigue-wise, physically, he's goosed. But I think mentally, when it gets to that back position towards the end, I think he's out of the match already. Again, that's not to discredit him as a fighter. I think after the week, because ADC is over 2 days, I think after a full weekend of matches, being in such a high energy match against Roger Gracie here, it's gonna play havoc physically and mentally with you and with your condition. But the sort of next part we're going to look at was they end up in a bit of a close guard exchange, and Roger wastes no time in trying to get back to his feet and start passing. And you sort of see Ribiero starts to try and counter that now and starts trying to stack the odds back in his favour to try and get to a better position.
Yeah, I found this next exchange really interesting to go over, so it'd be good to talk you guys through it as well. So we'll cue that up and then go through this whole sequence. Yeah, so after that little exchange there where we had the takedown and we were coming through that series of escaping the back control, the match goes into a bit of a close guard scenario. And we're just going to go and break down that bit now because there's a couple of interesting elements here. It looks on a first glance that it might have been a lucky scramble and a bit of misfortune in terms of balance, but there's actually a few key things that are going on from Xande's point of view on the bottom and Roger on the top trying to pass and get out of this close guard that actually end up leading to the escape and the position that ends up coming about. So let's get that queued up and have a look at the mechanics of what's going on in this bit of the match. So they've just kind of fought through this top position and they end up getting into a close guard here. Pretty quickly, Roger decides that he doesn't want to be here and starts standing up and trying to break the guard. He inserts his hand in around the back, but you can kind of already see that Xande from the bottom is trying to get those underhooks on the legs so he can try and mount a sweep. And he's already got a good amount of pressure around his hips with his legs. And there, if we just pause for a second, this is a really interesting part of the match before that sweep actually goes down. So Xande's got that inside hook and pressure on the legs. Now, Roger's done a good job of breaking the guard from the back by inserting that hand and breaking the legs apart, kind of Marcelo style from that match that we watched with Crom. And starting to try and do a leg drag, trying to bring it past her. But Xande keeps a good pinch on the hips. And as soon as the legs come through, that's his opportunity to kick and pull that leg. And you can see that the balance gets affected, which ends up meaning there's a twist there. Roger's not able to fully clear those legs, and it goes kind of into a bit of a position that looks like a Boston Crab or like Walls of Jericho style finish here, isn't it?
Yeah.
And Roger's kind of desperately clinging onto that leg out. I'm not sure whether he thinks there's a leg lock finish there because he's kind of got it in. He's keeping a tight pinch on it, but because he's not got any form of inside control here, there's no danger of submission from Xande's point of view, and he's just got to focus on getting that knee line clear. Starts turning to stand up. Roger's using that massive frame advantage, but as soon as he's up and out, there's no real pinch with the legs, and he's almost immediately able to turn and disengage.
Oh, definitely. I think another thing to point out here as well is Roger's ability to use his long frames here again. So this pressure he puts through the throat is, again, it's not only just to sort of cause a bit of discomfort through Ribiero's sort of breathing pathways and through the throat in itself, but it sort of does a good job of stretching him out. So he's posting through his throat. He's also sending his feet backwards and driving weight through the hips. So he's just sort of stacking his weight through Ribiero's hips, through his throat, and keeping his feet out of the way. So it's very difficult for Ribiero to reach and grab onto the actual limbs of Roger. As you can see there, he sort of tried to reach under, but he couldn't quite get a grasp of it.
So yeah, there's enough of a threat there on the weight on the neck for Xande to try and come in and start thinking about clearing that first, isn't it? But ordinarily, and what kind of like I've liked to do previously in the past in this sort of position is get your hands underneath the armpits and use that as a stretching out tool as you starting to stand in the close guard. But Hodges has gone from a different strategy here. Quite interesting, because there's enough pressure here on the neck that rather than, as you say, trying to start looking for the hooks on the legs to disturb the balance, that he kind of wants to come in and get rid of it. It doesn't look comfortable. But I've not personally been in that position. I've not felt what that pressure feels like, but it might be something that I start to implement now after having watched that.
I think in some rule sets now, that actual hand positioning on the throat is, I think it might be illegal, but there are a few ways to sort of get around that. Like chin, top of the chest.
Yeah.
There's ways around it that probably not as effective, but still have a similar effect.
Some of these rule sets are strange. You can choke somebody out in a really strong position here, but you can't do this.
Yeah.
Explain that one to me. I don't know.
It's probably more so in the way that it looks as opposed to anything else.
We'll leave that one for another podcast.
Yeah. And they sort of get back to the feet here. And it goes into just a bit more of a clinch exchange before there's a bit of an overtime round, and they come back out for what does become the finishing sequence, really.
Yeah, that's pretty much the end of the main match there, isn't it? So regulation time ends pretty quickly there. And no points, no real solid positions were solidified enough to get any points in that match. So ADCC semi-final ends up going to overtime. And then in the overtime break, it's really interesting looking at the mentality and fatigue levels of both players. Hodges in his corner, he looks like he's kind of ready, raring to go. He's got Xande Gracie in his ear screaming at him something nuts, no doubt, telling him to go out and rip his head off in the overtime on the match. And Xande comes out looking quite tired, similar to what we saw before when they reset the position after going out of bounds. There's definitely a difference in fatigue levels in the match, and that probably has a larger effect than you'd want to give credit to for the finish ending up happening from the back, as it does occur from the same position earlier on in the match.
Yeah, definitely. I think just to sort of help with what you were describing there, it might be worthwhile sort of playing through from the break so we can sort of see the posture and we can sort of talk through that and sort of try and share our insights with the sort of mindset that's going on between them. So here the sort of match is just sort of had a break. They've gone to the corners, and you can sort of see the difference. There's Hodger. He's taking deep breaths in. He's raring to go. He's got Xande in his ear. He's sort of almost ready. The posture here with Ribiero, look at him. He's lethargic. He's moving slowly. He doesn't look ready. He looks like he's finished. And like Saulo's not even trying to G him up there. Like, as being in his corner as a corner man, he should be rearing him up and trying to get him to get ready to go. But you can sort of see the difference. And Hodges ready. And just look at the way that they're both carrying themselves out as they coming out to the middle. Hodges chest high, head high. Ribeiro's he's not got a strong posture, you could argue. And then
straight back into the stand-up exchange again there now. I think like we were just talking about finishing there, you know, that to me looks kind of like a desperation Hail Mary single leg attempt.
Yeah,
he's on his knees. There's no drive. He's done a good job of tying the hands up, but that's about it. There's no way to drive from the leg, and Hodges just sprawls out immediately, gets his weight on top of him.
Like, if you look at it as well, like, I must play it through slowly. He doesn't even sort of try to grab the leg to drive. He almost drops to his knees as he's grabbing the leg. And it's all like, it's kind of like, so you see in like cartoons where the pets or like someone or the kids are sort of like grabbing onto the parent's leg as they're trying to go out the door. It's almost like that. And then Hodges,
if you ever see him in person, you can say that to him.
I'll say from a very far distance anyway. I'll tell you
Just
that.
enough not for him to go on a single leg.
Yeah. Hey, mate, if you single legs me like this, though, I'd be quite happy.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, really poor attempt at a single leg here. But I do think his mentality and his fatigue played massively into this. Because as we saw from the exchange before, the single leg that he went for there was actually quite a nice one. So I think that whole sequence prior to this and not probably working out as he might have liked played into this, and then being fatigued and just being on the end of a bit of a beating. It wasn't as one-sided as I'm kind of making it sound, but Hodges kept his sort of mental attitude in this match on quite a high level, and I think that sort of helped play the part in beating Ribiero here, not Saulo, Xande.
Yeah, so there's probably something to be said from that actually, because I believe this is the semi-final. In the final, I believe his opponent ends up throwing in the towel after the second round of overtime. That's right, isn't it? It classifies as a submission, but he actually gets it because his opponent withdraws from the overtime on the match. So there must be something imposing about dealing with Roger Gracie for 20 minutes of a match. That mentality of, and it kind of ties into what we were talking about there before. If you can always be up and ready, and even if you're tired, but show willing and not let your opponent see that look of defeat on your face, stepping across from a guy like that on the mat versus looking at a guy who looks tired, there's a big difference from a mental point of view. You've got to think about it when we're on the mats in training. Do you want to go against a guy if you're tired who looks fresh as a daisy? Or do you want to go against the guy who looks like he's having a tough time? Like, I know which match I want. I want the tough match personally, but from a point of view of a mentality, I always want to try and put out that energy that I'm ready to go, and seeing the sort of look and not fear that it puts into your opponent's eyes, but you can tell when somebody wants it and when they don't want it.
Yeah, you can sort of see with just by the way they engage with the clinch as well. Sort of they step forward and he just goes straight for that collar tie, and just it's almost as if Ribiero doesn't want to be there now. Like, fair play to him, he's shot on a single leg. That's not easy to do when you're tired, but.
And actually, what I'll add into that, if we we're just looking at this, like, Hodges working to try and defend that. There must have been some good pinch there, even though he's not up on his toes driving. He's looking like he's having a bit of difficulty to try and break the grip and sprawl out. It's not just an easy case of kicking back and coming straight out up onto the back. And now, although he's got onto the back, he's straight into kind of a seatbelt control here with a single hook in and kind of riding around in this position a bit. He does a really good job of riding the seatbelt, using his hooks to manipulate Xande's position. And Xande's still fighting. There's a lot going on here. He's not just accepting that position, but nearly shakes him off to the side and starts to scoot out. But at this position, Hodges does a great job of locking up a body triangle. And for a big guy with long legs, that is a super controlling position. Still got the seatbelts in, but that pinch across Xande's rib cage and stomach now, that's going to be a lot of pressure to handle. And one thing that I looked back on when I was watching this match here, great control of the wrist. This is a really useful tool to try and fight from a defending point of view. If you're attacking, you want as few arms available to the defending guy as possible. So if you can isolate off one of the arms and it's a one-on-one fight onto the neck, that's going to be much more advantageous for you than having the guy be able to defend with a two-on-one.
Yeah,
so Hodges does a great job here of stuffing that wrist and taking away one potential defending arm.
I think another thing to point out here, like going back to the body triangle, is the position of Hodges' lower limb across Ribiero's waist compared to how high the hips are on his back. And in this sequence, you can sort of see the extension that Hodges puts in. Well, it went a little bit too fast there. But as we sort of play it through, he starts squeezing almost immediately and driving his hips in. And then he starts to turn him over. And that there is really, really uncomfortable.
I don't know about you, but I've tapped a good handful of people who don't really want to be in that position a few times over the years. Like, you can get a good amount of pressure there, can't you?
If I'm honest, mate, my legs are too short to be able to body triangle people. So,
well, you just need to get skinnier training partners.
I try that, but in the night in my weight division, I'm like a hobbit. So thanks for reminding me, mate.
Yeah, no, worries.
But off the back of what you're saying as well about the wrist control, I think this the control here is quite interesting. Is controlling almost quite low to the hand as opposed to coming up the arm, and I think that's a very important factor to have in when you're controlling someone's wrist or hand fighting. It's called hand fighting, not forearm fighting. So let's take the literal name of that, and we're trying to control the hands. Now, when next time you're on someone's back, as opposed to controlling the wrist up here, try going beyond the sort of wrist joint and having at least 2 fingers over the hand, and then see the difference in degree of control that you've got over your partner's upper limbs. It's quite a large difference. I don't know if you've played the same one, but I quite like the difference in that wrist control.
Yeah, definitely. It's just like basic mechanics and leverage, isn't it? The more extension you've got on the lever, the more control you've got over it. And yeah, rightly so, like controlling the wrist rather than the forearm, there's a lot more purchase there, and you can manipulate the joint a lot more. Now, in this position here as well, something that's quite interesting that kind of played around with over the years of this position as well is there's the option there for that wrist to get pushed onto the inside of the leg. Now, the chokes are almost already kind of sunk in, but if Xande was doing a better job of defending here, or should I say Hodgie was having a more difficult time of getting that arm in under the neck, what he could have done was taken that arm that he's extending out and pushed it in between his legs. So now it's a 2-on-1 fight for Hodger from the back, as opposed to being a 1-on-1 fight.
I think you could probably argue a strong case that that's probably what he's trying to do here.
Yeah.
Until he starts, because if you watch him, as soon as he starts to fall to his side, he's attacking that neck almost immediately.
Yeah, he gets the hand in soon enough that he doesn't need to worry about that, isn't it?
Yeah, and then he goes straight onto the neck.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't mess around with trying to get the whole elbow in line with the chin. Like, it's great to know the mechanics of that, but when you're getting around the neck and you can get underneath that chin, the most important thing is not the position of your elbow, it's to actually squeeze.
Yeah, he's applying the squeeze from the get-go
there, I've seen quite a few people miss out on chokes in that position because they're more focused on getting the perfect choking as opposed to just getting underneath the chin and applying direct pressure to the throat. Which
kind of saying the difference between a full rear naked choke and a short choke.
Exactly, yeah. So like, that's, for me, I'm more of a fan of the short choke, as I find the mechanics and the percentage of actually finishing it much higher. And you could potentially sort of say that the finish that Hodger got, a bit of a hybrid between short choke and a rear naked. Like, he's got the middle of the forearm across his throat, and I think he's using his levers to his advantage there again. But he could arguably just have his left arm here behind Ribiero's shoulder and going straight for that short choke.
Kind of probably what's an interesting point on that when you break down the mechanics of it, when you start talking about bigger guys applying that choke. It's a lot easier for somebody with skinnier arms to get the whole length of the forearm in underneath the neck and apply that choke, especially if somebody's doing a good job of tucking the chin. Whereas for anybody with like bigger arms, it's going to be a lot easier to try. People who weight train and eat acai balls, particularly the acai balls, is an important factor. But getting the wrist in is a lot easier than getting in at the thicker part of the forearm. it's a lot easier for the guy to defend. So just take that into account as well. You got to think, you're not going to be able to get directly in with the inside of the elbow on a choke on a lot of people who know how to defend properly. So starting to work it in with the small bit of your hand and then finishing with a short choke is going to be a lot more accessible for some people than it is for others. I don't know if this kind of plays in when you're wrestling or pummeling against guys who've got small, skinny arms. It's like spaghetti noodles getting in underneath and swimming under your armpits. It's really difficult to deal with, isn't it? Whereas if you're coming against somebody who's got big, chunky arms, there's a lot less space there. You can control that space a lot easier and get on the inside.
So I was talking about that same concept last night with the bigger player versus smaller player. They can fit into smaller gaps, and I think that's where a lot of these smaller players can capitalize against the bigger player, and where a lot of bigger players kind of fault when they try to go against smaller players. They try to wrestle with them or grapple with them like they're big players, instead of changing the way that they play and actually taking space away, instead of relying on sort of the same amount of space to take away against big players.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept, isn't it? You've got to look at your game from a point of view of know your skill set, but then also know how to apply that onto the player that you're going against. It's not always going to be directly the same from one player to another. You might have to employ a different strategy on a smaller opponent, or it might be a better idea to use a different tactic on a larger opponent. So it's just gamesmanship. Have a good arsenal of techniques and don't narrow yourself down the path of one thing, because it's not always going to work on every different body type or skill set.
No, definitely. But I really enjoyed watching this match and sort of going into it and studying it. Like, you kind of grow to appreciate both players' skill sets within this match and both of their strengths, and also the sort of mental game that kind of goes into this kind of setting, which I think it's a bit under talked about. I've only come across a handful of coaches that will talk about the psychology behind certain moves and certain positions, as well as showing the techniques. And like I said, like me and you both, we like to talk about that kind of stuff when we're drilling positions and also teaching them positions, sort of the mindset behind it. And I think it's something that's under taught. Like, I know that my coaches Cam and Darren, they talk into that side of things very heavily, and I think as you're learning that whilst you're trying to progress through sort of your journey, you understand the game a lot better. Yeah, like, is that something that you found?
Absolutely. Training over the years, my coaches as well, Matt and Alan down at 12 Gauge, and just discovering and playing around with those strategies in my own training and with my main training partners. It's not only just learning the mechanics of the technique, it's also learning the why and what is important about using that strategy at that time. So, being able to impose your will on somebody in a match is really important, and being on the receiving end of that isn't nice. If you're in a position in a match that's under, you're under dominance, you're having to submit to somebody's pressure or just overall positioning in the match, it's not a nice place to be. So flip that around. If you can be that guy that's applying the dominant position to somebody underneath continuously throughout the match, psychologically, that's going to give you the upper hand as well.
Well, definitely. But yeah, like I say, thank you for tuning in with us today, guys. If you've got any further questions about this match, feel free to drop them in the comments below. Find us on our Facebook and Instagram, the Grapplers Academy, on both. Make sure you subscribe to this video, and any requests for future videos or future matches, feel free to drop them below in the comments. Send us them by direct message, and we'll do our best to get round to them. Anything you want to add to that, Bon?
Yeah, just to tie up there and answer one question that we did have, one fairly serious question that we did have leading up to this match. I know we had a couple of questions that I'll leave it up to you to decide whether you want to answer those when we go into it in a second. But one serious question that we did have in this match was from a former colleague of mine, Alan, a good friend of mine. He was asking, the specific question was, let me get this up. He said, do bald guys always do it better? I think he was referring to the picture that we put up with Roger and Xande side by side. In this case, no.
No.
Xande didn't get the best of the match. Although Roger's got a bit of a receding hairline, I wouldn't quite call him bald just yet. And I think he's had a bit of a hair transplant to give him a nice little head of hair now.
So arguably he's in that bald camp then.
Yeah, so, but I think he was more referring to Xande's full baldness. He kind of embraced it, didn't he? He had the receding hairline. He's a bit more follically challenged than his brother Salo, so whipped it all off. And yeah, not on this occasion. So sorry, Alan, bald guys aren't doing it better on this occasion, but other times, maybe so. And just to close out, just recapping on what Simon said, leave us any messages in the comments. It's always interesting and funny for us to read through them.
No, definitely.
But equally, any serious ones as well on matches that you want us to cover in the future. We're always keen for some feedback on that.
Brilliant. So thanks again for watching, guys, and we'll catch you next week.